Today we're switching gears. Today we're talking about the core message of our faith, the center point of all we believe, all that we do, and why we do it. We're talking about the very reason for everything, the most important corner of our faith. Today I want to step into the resurrection, the Easter miracle, the story that sits at the center. Now, before I do that, I want to once again welcome you to this moment. I remind you that this experiment is intended to help our existing community and new visitors both connect and then grow in the understanding of who we are and what we're all about. For me, this has been an incredible way to connect. And each week I seem to get at least a question or an email or two about something in these messages. I remind all of you that that's part of the reason why we're doing this. Feel free to reach out to us directly and ask your questions. Subscribe to this site and ultimately know that we're committed to being a part of your journey. And with that said, I'm Pastor Scott Masters and I welcome you to Asbury Online. Truthfully, for many, the resurrection is this great stumbling block. And I'm sure you all know this story. Our faith teaches that Jesus was arrested, executed, and then put into a grave. The world thought he was dead, but 3 days later he appears again, and the world hasn't stopped talking about it. Now, I will admit that this is a hard story. Today, when people die, they stay dead. This just doesn't happen. But today I want you to consider, for just a moment, the story from a different angle. Consider it a bit deeper. This man who traveled ancient Palestine was said to embrace a different life and a different purpose. He talked about rising above the mess. He talked about building a life that was focused on love. And he talked about living as if the divine invaded every aspect of life, both the good and the bad. He talked about finding the divine and the divine's purpose for you in the midst of it all. And although his message was powerful and if embraced, it could be radically transformative, the truth is, I imagine even that wasn't enough to have millions of people continue to gather in his name for 2,000 years. So we go further. This man made his world afraid. He challenged their systems and their power structures. And the authorities, threatened by the crowds that this man was gathering, they arrested him and then they tried him in a kangaroo court. He was punished and put to death. And that story is powerful. It's heartbreaking. But even that might not be enough. What is buried deeper in this story is where the story finds its meaning. It was a Thursday night when Jesus was arrested. He was betrayed by one of his closest friends. Now, maybe he was betrayed because that friend wanted Jesus to finally act and to finally do something. Or maybe he betrayed Jesus simply because the lessons that Jesus taught were just too much for him to wrap his arms around. For the last 3 years, Jesus was trying to show that inner circle a different type of God. He was trying to show them a God that cared for everyone. And he was preaching to everyone along the way, everyone that would listen. He was trying to help them see that there was a different, better, and holier way. And those very same people he was preaching to eventually pushed the authorities to punish him as severely as they could. They were afraid of what his change meant. Now imagine what it would mean for us to have that type of God today. Imagine a God that loved Democrats and Republicans the same way, loved those who were gay as much as he loved those who were not, or loved vegetarians as much as meat eaters, loved the messed up as much as the put together. Can you imagine a God who practiced that incredibly foolish kind of love? So as they debated what to do with this Jesus character, one by one of his closest friends began to desert him. Even the strongest among them, a disciple nicknamed Peter, a word that means rocky. Peter, known for his strength, his bravado, and his courage, denied Jesus and ran away. So alone, Jesus was sentenced to and faced death. And they made sure it wasn't quick or easy. They wanted to send a message to all that might come behind him. They sentenced him to a cross and told the world that this would be your fate too if you followed this man. And when he made it up to that hill, the place of his execution, you and I, we can only wonder what was going through his mind. How did things go south so quickly? Where was his friends, his community, his family, his faith, his government? They all failed him. Everything that the world told you that you could trust in deserted this man. And in the pain and the hurt of those final moments, he was heartbroken, calling out to God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forgotten me?" were his last words as he offered his last breaths. Now, for those of you, or for those who witnessed the first part of this story, they probably would have expected that it would have been here that the story ended. But it doesn't. There is so much more to this story, and although the details of what precisely happened have been debated ever since, the story didn't end up on that ugly hill. The world awoke on that Sunday morning, and there were ripples already. Now, some say the authorities stole his body. Now, others said he escaped. Some said he didn't die. Some said he did die, but then came back to life. Something happened, and everything changed. Soon, people started reporting that they saw Jesus and they experienced him in very real ways. Was he really there, they asked. Some said he died but came back to life, and some reported something bigger, more powerful, and more divine. Whatever happened on that hill started conversations that began with a hushed whisper and then never stopped. Very quickly, those whispers increased in volume, and within a few weeks, the story spread. Within a few months, this community started to grow, and within a decade, there were thousands of followers. Those who knew Jesus somehow found the courage to come out from the shadows and then continue his story. They continued that story even as one by one they met their own execution for refusing to speak against his teaching. The courage never wavered. Their deaths became their most powerful testimony, and within 100 years, there were hundreds of thousands of followers. So we ask, can we believe in this stuff? And I can tell you that yes, I can. But then your next question is probably why. And to that, I say I believe because of what happened on that hill. I believe because I've been there. I found myself in those places where everything I trusted seemed to fail. Those rules, the system, and the expectation, they all crumbled. All that I trusted in to give me the answers and to provide me security crumbled in the weight of that moment. I felt alone. I was hurting. I was unsure. I remember looking around at everything I trusted and needed and crying out those very same words, my God, why have you forgotten or forsaken me?" The darkness, the ugliness, the heartbreak, the loneliness, and the hurt of that hill was not the end of the story. In that moment, I felt the earth shake and the sky go dark. It wasn't the end of the story, because in that moment, the divine broke through, and with it, everything changed. Now, I'm a grown man. Before seminary, I studied math and finance. I just don't do this church thing either. I also hold a day-to-day job in the real world where I stare at spreadsheets day in and day out. Sometimes I spend my entire day looking for facts, patterns, data, and numbers. And I'm a science geek. And I am so obsessive about cause, order, and structure that you can send me for a complete loop simply by putting the bananas in the wrong place in my carriage at the supermarket. Now, ask my family. This is a fun way that they like to poke at their old man. I know that too often the world claims that this is all a fairy tale. I've heard the world say that we should have outgrown this. I've heard a world that says faith isn't scientific, it isn't mathematical, or it isn't even intellectual. To all those statements, I have a singular response. It's easy to say this, but wait. Wait until you find yourself on that hill. One day you'll find yourselves on that hill hurting, beat up, broken, alone. Our hearts will ache at what seems like no way out. This story and this truth reminds us that the divine will break through and offer renewal, redemption, and resurrection for each of us. It is the single most important story of our faith and of life, and it leaves us with this choice to grab a hold or to turn around. We have this choice before us. We recognize that even the holiest among us struggle. We don't have the answers. We don't have all the answers. But we want there to be more. We want all of this to be true. We want to know that there's a power available to us that lets us transcend all the ugliness of the hurt in the world. So in the end, my job, week in and week out, back in the pulpit and now via these gatherings, is to try to help you see that there is. To help you figure out a way for you to let your guard down long enough to grab a hold. To offer you something that is simpler, more straightforward, more transformative, and more inclusive to eventually get you to step into this truth in this moment. So my hope is for each of you to see what I'm learning to see. I want you to see faith less about where you get some exhaustive manual full of rules to live by, but rather as a way to hold in your hand something that you can hold up to yourself and to all the communities in which you navigate and catch a glimpse of God. It's my hope that you will claim the gift that comes in the promise of the divine breaking through all aspects of your life, the good and the bad, so that you too can find redemption, renewal, resurrection, restart. This is the center point to everything. This is what matters. I pray that you'll step into it. I also pray that you have a blessed journey, and I thank you for letting me be just a small part. Thanks. Have a blessed day. God bless.